state director for Obama for America. Organizing for America, Obama for America was very involved in the HB 194 effort. He'll be happy to speak about that effort and his organization's contributions to it first, and take any questions that you have about that effort. And then Chairman Redfern will be happy to take any questions you have about the redistricting referendum and so forth.
We're very excited today to announce an additional turning in of 166,481 signatures to help stop the House Bill 194 from going into effect. We collected in the 3 weeks after September 29th, and in those that remember, we turned in 318,000 signatures on the 29th. In the 3 weeks following, we collected an average of 7,000 more signatures a day. And so these boxes, as Chairman Redfern can tell you, have been literally collecting dust in the basement of the Ohio Democratic Party, waiting for the Secretary of State to tell us when we could turn them in. And the Secretary of State announced last week that they reviewed the first set, and we qualified in over 52 counties. The state law requires qualifying in 44. So in our first filing, we more than met the requirement with 52 counties, and just needed a little over 9,000 more signatures to meet the 231,000 threshold statewide. And the 166,000 signatures plus behind me will more than meet that requirement. So it was a volunteer effort, a lot of progressive organizations, the Ohio Democratic Party, people from across the state. As you all know, from late summer to early fall have been collecting, and this is just kind of the capstone of all those great volunteer efforts. So I'm going to let Chairman Redfern go from there.
Thanks, Greg. I think Greg hit all the high points for us. We've let the Secretary's office know that we're coming over, and the good news is for John's office that just over 6 months ago, they had a mechanical and structural engineer come in and make sure that their floors could take the additional weight of these petitions. Over the course of the last year, almost 2 million petitions have been collected from across all of Ohio's 88 counties to repeal such egregious pieces of legislation like Senate Bill 5, now House Bill 194, and obviously the work that's ongoing with House Bill 319. I welcome any questions.
How many signatures do you have for 319?
I will also say, if I may, Joe, beforehand, Greg mentioned the broad coalition of progressive groups, organizations, labor organizations, community groups, some aligned, some not aligned, with the Democratic Party, candidates, volunteers from every community you can think of, whether it was in Eaton, up in Williams County when I visited with the mayor up there, she was just recently reelected, or here in Columbus, small towns and villages to large cities. We've seen an incredible outpouring of support. And democracy is a great thing. And when it's exhibited as it is literally today, it makes us all more appreciative of the work that's done in these kinds of these communities across the state. So Greg and I are just mere spokespeople for the work that's been done, and I'm proud to have been part, however modest, in these efforts. Joseph.
How many do you have for 319?
The work continues. We have just over 100,000 signatures collected for the repeal of House Bill 319. We're excited about this weekend and Black Friday, and the fact that we'll have, like we did last weekend, a day of action where we're focusing on high visibility areas, and there'll be plenty of them this Friday with shoppers. So we're excited about that.
You have such.
Also recognize that Speaker Batchelder, through Matt Huffman, Representative Huffman, has been working with Leader Budish on a compromise on maps. That does not distract us from our task of collecting signatures, but we recognize that there is still an ongoing effort to seek a legislative solution to the gerrymandered maps and to craft districts that are competitive and give Democrats at least an opportunity to be successful over the course of the next 8 or 9 years. Last week, early last week, I guess it was, I met with some folks also who were interested in putting something on the ballot next year to fundamentally reform the way congressional districts are drawn, and those discussions are ongoing. But this is really a day to talk about House Bill 194. We're excited. In fact, it's going to be on the ballot next year, and we're going to defeat 194 as we did Senate Bill 5. And again, it's not going to be a Democrat versus Republican issue. This is quite simply those of us who believe that the right to the franchise, the right to the ballot box should be protected at all costs. I'll note that today's the anniversary, the sad anniversary of the assassination of President Kennedy, and we know that during the 1960s, the Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, and all those important pieces of legislation were passed. And here in Ohio, we can't undone the great work of our and the legacy of predecessors that came before us.
The Senate Bill 5 petitions collected 1.3 million, a super high energy level. We collected a lot of signatures for the second cause, but much less for those who would say, well, it's a hard act to follow.
That's going to be always the goal. We always have to get 1.32 million signatures on every referendum bill. We made history with Senate Bill 5, and we continue to make history with 194. It's not to be underestimated, the work that's in place. And as you know, we said it over and over and over. It seemed that the tenure of Governor Kasich has been swept away, and the results speak for themselves.
Could you walk through a little bit about what this means in terms of next year's presidential election and what the intended consequences were of 194?
Sure. A bipartisan bill that was passed a few years ago with the vote of John Husted, with the vote of Kevin DeWine, and with my vote as former members of the legislature, is still the law of the land, because we've gotten enough signatures, as Greg mentioned, with this broad coalition. We'll be able to place this particular bill on the ballot, this particular law on the ballot for repeal in next year. And as you know, Ohio will be an incredibly important state for the re-election of Senator Brown and President Obama, Vice President Biden. We'll have extraordinarily talented and wide infrastructure in place to get out the vote and repeal 194. And we'll be playing by laws that were written by Republicans. It's odd that we tend, especially a handful of columnists tend to forget that, and editorial writers tend to forget that the previous law that we're now abiding by, that is the rule of Ohio anyway, rule of the land here in Ohio, was written by Republicans and drew wide bipartisan support. It passed and was signed into law by Republicans, voted on by Kevin DeWine, the chairman of the Republican Party, and John Husted, now Secretary of State. It seems to be lost on people, the need to have 194 in place now. So we'll sweep this away as we did Senate Bill 5. We'll accept the apologies after the election. We look forward to continuing to press for opportunities for Ohioans to come and vote at the polls early and an open process, 7 days a week for the 35 days that we have.
This referendum being on the ballot, how much will it help or not help President Obama's re-election campaign?
I think the fact that the President, Senator Brown, and so many others stood up to protect American jobs, places like Toledo and Youngstown and Defiance, the supply chain network that comes with the American automobile industry here in Ohio is so important. More than 2,500 small, medium-sized businesses are directly tied to the success or failure of the American automobile industry. I think that will have a great deal in the re-election of the President and Senator Brown and so many others. I think that there is a clear and contrasting difference between President Obama and Senator Brown and where they stand on access to affordable health care, and Mitt Romney and Herman Cain and Newt Gingrich and their ever-evolving positions on these kinds of issues. I think given where we are in Ohio and what President Obama has done over the course of his first term and what Senator Brown did over the course of his first term, I think those kinds of messages will be what power us to success next November.
But what
now,
as far as
the actual infrastructure and turning out to vote, look, when more people vote, Democrats win. It's just as simple as that. It's no secret why the Republicans all across this country are in the process of trying to suppress voters. There's no secret. If you close down opportunities to vote, fewer Democrats vote. And in a state like Ohio, where there's 1 million more Democrats could vote than Republicans, obviously there's opportunities, and repealing House Bill 194 gives us that opportunity. Now, to your question, I always like to give a nice long preface to the question, Bill. To your question, I think that it could help, but I think there are so many more issues, not necessarily more important, but so many other issues as well. And the clear and distinct contrast between President Obama and the likes of Newt Gingrich, for goodness sake, Herman Cain, and Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney literally was for it, against it, and neutral vis-a-vis Senate Bill 5. For it, against it, and neutral on the American automobile industry. You know, that may play in places like Nashua, New Hampshire, where he's a neighbor in Massachusetts, but it's not going to play in. It's not going to play in Youngstown or Toledo. It's just flat out not going to happen.
What do you do about the early voting closing on Friday? That was obviously added to a different bill. Are you planning any kind of challenge to that?
Yeah, we've discussed some legal challenges, but I also want to impress upon Secretary Husted that as the Secretary, he has the ability to draft rules and abide by the law, both the spirit and the letter. And in this case, it's clear the House Bill 194 is going to referendum, and that we ought not have to seek redress in the courts prior to seeking redress in at the ballot box to repeal the most onerous parts of 194. And limiting voters' chances, especially in the final couple of days of the election, really handcuffs the will of the people. And I asked Secretary Husted to revisit his decision not to allow voters access to the ballot box. And we'll cross the bridge if he so declines. We'll cross that bridge when it comes.
With all the other races,
You know, he's a smart guy. I'm sorry. Secretary Husted voted on the doggone bill, didn't he? I was there. I say this repeatedly. I was a witness to the crime. In this case, it wasn't a crime, but I was there. He voted for it. As I recall, he may have been a co-sponsor of it. I know Kevin DeWine wasn't a co-sponsor, but he did vote for it. They've had this evolution, this political evolution over the course of the last few years, funded in large part by the Koch brothers, that we should limit ability to get to the ballot box. I don't know what folks are scared of. Democracy is a great thing. We ought to let everybody enjoy it.
with all the other